criminals are often forced to spend many years behind bars. And for some, the idea of running away and becoming a fugitive of the law is far more attractive than spending life in prison. Number 5. At just 25 years old, Victor Manuel Gerena pulled off one of the most impressive bank robberies in recent history. In 1983, the 25-year-old was working for Wells Fargo at the West Hartford, Connecticut office, where coworkers described him as a well-liked and trusted employee. Little did they know that the well-liked employee was about to take off with over $7 million. On September 12, 1983, Gerena arrived at work and asked his manager if he could park the car that he was driving in Park Bay 5. His supervisor was hesitant and confused, but Gerena explained that the car didn't belong to him and he wanted to leave it in Bay 5 because he felt it was the most secure. His manager eventually gave in and allowed him to park the 1976 Buick LeSabre in Bay 5, unaware of what was to come. Gerena went about his day as normal, driving around Connecticut and collecting money from banks and businesses with his work partner. He kicked his plan into action when he arrived back at the main office at around 9 p.m. In a split second, Gerena turned on his partner and his manager. He pulled out a gun and held them at gunpoint, forcing them onto the ground. Once they were subdued, he handcuffed them and injected them with an unknown substance to render them powerless. There was a reason that Gerena had parked the 1976 Buick in parking Bay 5 that day. After his manager and partner were out of the way, he let his accomplices in, and they got to work loading the $7 million into the Buick. They quickly loaded up the car and sped away before police had a chance to catch them. Gerena and his team made a hasty getaway and are believed to have fled to Puerto Rico with $7 million in hand. Following the robbery, Gerena was placed on the FBI's most wanted fugitives list and has been ever since. The FBI is now offering a $1 million reward for any information that leads to the arrest of Gerena. He's described as an American Hispanic male with brown hair and green eyes. He's 5'6", and the latest FBI intelligence suggests that he may be living in Cuba under an assumed name. If you have any information, you're asked to contact your local FBI office. Number 4. Glenn Stewart Godwin is the 447th person to have made it onto the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, following his 1981 arrest. In 2016, Godwin was removed from the list as he no longer fits the criteria, but that doesn't mean the FBI aren't still looking for him, and there's currently a $20,000 reward for information. In 1980, Godwin, along with his roommate, Frank Soto Jr., killed Kim Robert LaValle in what had started as a robbery. Godwin and Soto Jr. chose LaValle as he was a known drug dealer and often carried large amounts of cash with him. The pair lured him back to their apartment, where they first beat him. After he refused to give them what they wanted, they killed him and left his body in a truck in the desert of Eagle Mountain, California. The truck was discovered on August 3, 1980, by residents who immediately called the police, and an investigation was opened. Following a lengthy investigation, Godwin and Soto Jr. were arrested and charged in connection with the murder. Soto Jr. was sentenced to serve 25 to life, while Godwin was given 26 to life. By 1983, the pair were behind bars, serving their respective sentences. However, Godwin stated that prison just didn't cut it for him. In 1987, Godwin was moved to Folsom State Prison after trying to escape from the previous facility that he'd been housed in. Despite being moved to Folsom, which is a maximum security prison, Godwin still found a way to get out. Shortly after arriving at Folsom, Godwin, with the help of his cellmate, cut a hole in the prison's fence using tools that had been smuggled into the prison by his wife, Shelley. After Godwin had escaped through the fence, he crawled through a storm drain and made it onto a raft that had been left for him on the banks of the American River. Godwin was unable to leave his criminal past behind. Following his daring escape, he made it to Mexico, but he was once again arrested and sentenced to 7 years and 6 months. After checking his records, Mexican authorities found out he was on the FBI's most wanted list and applied to the US government to have him extradited. This request took quite a while, and because of this, Godwin was once again able to carry out an escape plan in September of 1991. Since his final escape from a Mexican prison in 1991, Godwin has been on the run and is considered an armed and dangerous fugitive by the FBI. Glenn Stewart Godwin is described as a white male with salt and pepper hair and green eyes. He's between 170 and 200 pounds and stands at 6 feet. There's currently a $20,000 reward for information that leads to his arrest, and if you have any information about him, you're urged to contact your local FBI office. Number 3. In 1891, Francis Herman moved from England to the US, hoping to start a new life in the American frontier. He settled down quickly in Minneapolis and was married to Bertha Wagner. The marriage to Bertha was not his first. Back in England, Herman had married a woman, however, she passed away under suspicious circumstances. Months after his arrival and marriage, Herman noticed that his wife, Bertha, was mentally unstable and had her committed to a mental asylum. Within hours of arriving at the asylum, Bertha too died under suspicious circumstances, but her death was never investigated and she was laid to rest. A pattern was quickly emerging, but those around Herman failed to spot it, and a year after Bertha passed away, he married yet another woman who he simply referred to as Miss Lowen. Following his third marriage to Miss Lowen, things started looking up for Herman. The couple eventually moved to Superior, Wisconsin, and Francis became the pastor of a church. In 1893, the pair moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, just in time for the arrival of their first child. Sadly, the birth would end badly for both the mother and the baby. They both passed away shortly after the birth, but the doctor did note that the mother's cause of death did seem suspicious. Herman would go on to kill 2 more women. However, by the time investigators had put things together, Francis Herman was long gone. On top of the murder charges brought against him, Herman was also wanted for embezzling church funds and had a huge target on his back. Francis Herman was last seen on May 7, 1896. Police tried their best to track him down. However, without the modern technologies of today's time, they were left at a dead end. There were a few confirmed sightings of Herman over the years. However, he was never captured and never brought to justice. Number 2. Arthur Lee Washington Jr. is the 427th person to have been placed on the FBI's most wanted list following the attempted murder of a New Jersey state trooper in 1989. Washington Jr. has since been moved from the top 10 list, but is still wanted by the FBI, who are appealing to anyone with information to come forward. Arthur Lee Washington Jr. has officially been a fugitive since April 12th of 1989, following the attempted murder of New Jersey State Trooper Michael J. Clayton. On April 12th, Washington Jr. and an accomplice were driving around New Jersey when they were pulled over for a traffic violation. Clayton explained to the driver that the inspection sticker on the 1979 Ford Thunderbird had expired. Washington Jr. was actually in the passenger seat of the car and decided to get out and walk away, not wanting to be involved. As he got out of the vehicle and began to walk, he was instructed by Clayton to stop and to get back in the car. Washington Jr. ignored these instructions and kept walking. However, when he noticed that he was being followed by Clayton, he pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times. A gunfight quickly ensued, and Washington was somehow able to slip away on foot, never to be seen again. He was charged with attempted murder and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, for which he was placed on the FBI's most wanted list. Despite no longer being on the top 10 list, the FBI is still appealing to anyone with information to come forward. Arthur Lee Washington Jr. is described as an African American male, 6'1", with black hair and brown eyes. He is a vegetarian and has scars on his right thigh, neck, and wrists. If you have any information, you're urged to contact your local FBI office, but the FBI advised to not approach him as he's armed and dangerous. Number 1. Born in 1877 in Austria-Hungary, Bela Kiss has gone down in history as one of the world's most elusive serial killers. What's also incredibly unusual about Bela is that he waited until much later in life to become a serial killer, and didn't start until he was in his 40s. When he was around 40 years old, he moved to a village in Hungary with his wife Marie, who was much younger than him. To his dismay, just weeks after moving into the village, his wife began to have an affair with another man, driving him into a fit of rage. According to his neighbors, he was pleasant, if not a little odd, but mostly kept to himself. In December of 1912, Kiss informed his neighbors that they wouldn't be seeing Marie or her lover anymore, as the pair had run off together into the sunset. However, experts believe that there is a far more sinister explanation behind her disappearance. It's theorized that Kiss killed his wife and her lover before storing them in large metal drums on his property. Unable to look after the home on his own, he hired a housekeeper, Miss Jakubek, who mostly kept out of his businesses, but one detail did strike her as odd. Kiss had started stockpiling metal drums, and when he was approached by the police, he assured them that he was just stockpiling gasoline in anticipation of a war breaking out in Europe. It wouldn't be until July of 1916 when the local town learned the truth about what Kiss was hiding in the metal drums. At the onset of World War I, Kiss was conscripted into the Austro-Hungarian army and went to fight in various battlefields across Europe. At the time, the Austro-Hungarians were growing desperate for supplies. They came across the home of Kiss and were delighted to find 7 large drums that were apparently filled with gasoline. Upon opening the drums, they were met with a horrific sight. Inside was the body of a woman who had died by strangulation. A further search of the property revealed the bodies of 23 women who had all been killed in a similar way and drained of their blood. Kiss was charged with murder. However, because he was away at war, police now had the task of finding his location and sending out an arrest warrant. Letters found inside of his home revealed that he would lure women in through Lonely Heart's columns, asking them for money before getting rid of them. Kiss, however, was one step ahead of police and knew of his impending arrest. In October of 1916, an officer was sent to arrest Kiss after intel revealed he was recovering in a Serbian hospital. However, by the time police arrived, he had disappeared. He managed to slip out of the hospital by placing the body of a dead soldier onto his bed, tricking staff into thinking he was still there. There were a few reported sightings of the fugitive, including one in 1932 in New York. Henry Oswald, a New York homicide detective, reported that he had seen the elusive fugitive walking out of Times Square subway system, but was unable to apprehend him. Since his 1916 escape, Kiss has never been seen again and never faced justice for his crimes. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.